Hello, it's a beautiful morning, and I want to welcome everyone who is joining me on today's episode of Morning Breakfast. Good morning. Today, we'll consider a wonderful topic captioned Spirituality, a Way of Life. And our Bible reference is coming from the book of Galatians, chapter 6, verse 1. And it says, Brethren, if any person is overtaken in misconduct or sin of any sort, you who are spiritual, who are responsive to and controlled by the Spirit, should set him right and restore and reinstate him without any sense of superiority and with all gentleness, keeping an attentive eye on yourself, lest you should be tempted also. A lot of persons have given their definitions when it comes to spirituality or what makes an individual a spiritual person. One of the greatest misconception is that if you are the type that fasts, if you are the type that pray, if you are the type that can speak in tongues for hours, then this particular thing makes you a spiritual person. This pattern of life makes you a spiritual person, and you are living a life of spirituality. Well, that is to you, but I have a different perception to that, and that perception is spirituality is a way of life. The Bible says, if you see anyone who is in the act of any misconduct or sin, you who is spiritual, you who is controlled by the Spirit of God, you who is living your life controlled by the Spirit of God, should be able to correct them with all what? Gentleness, and at the same time keep an eye on yourself so that you do not fall into the same temptation. But we live in a world today where people condemn persons that they find in the act of what? Misconduct. Misconduct can be anything, but the simplest definition I can give for misconduct is anything you do that is against the will of God. It's an act of misconduct. In fact, anything that you do that is not controlled by the Spirit of God, that it's not acceptable before God, is an act of misconduct. Yes, somebody can still be spiritual and still find himself or herself in this act of misconduct, but your ability to recognize the fact that you have actually fallen in one act of misconduct on the other, and ask God to forgive you and ask God to have mercy upon you, that shows you are a spiritual person. If you cannot listen to correction and you feel that you are on top, you are not a spiritual person. There are a lot of persons who say they are spiritual, but they are living a life of unforgiveness. They are living a life of hatred. They cheat, they lie, they quarrel, they cause troubles. But when it comes to prayer, fasting, and praying in tongues for hours, they are first class. Hello, you are doing very, very well. But I put it to you today, that doesn't make you spiritual. Spirituality is a way of life. How do you live with your neighbors? How do you live with your family and friends? How do you talk to your husband? How do you talk to your wife? How do you talk to your children? How do you act with people around you? What is your conduct when it comes to your association with people? Is it being controlled by the Spirit of God or controlled by your flesh? And that would give us a simplest definition of someone who is spiritual and someone who is living a life of spirituality. And that definition is, a spiritual person is one who is controlled by a spirit. And the spirit I'm talking about is the Spirit of God. And living a life of spirituality is living your life under the control of God. If you are living your life not under the control of God, you are not a what? A spiritual person. How do you correct people when you see them doing one thing that is not good? How do you correct? How do you relate with them? Do you curse them? Do you place judgments on them? Or do you try to find a way to be of help to them? And even when doing this, do you put an eye on yourself to make sure that you don't get into that misconduct you are trying to correct people? If you live your life not controlled by the Spirit of God, You live your life only based on fasting, praying in tongues for hours, and you are not at peace with your neighbor. You make quarrels, you fight every now and then, you steal, you cheat, you defraud people, and you think you are living a spiritual life. I'm sorry, you are not living a spiritual life. Spirituality is a way of life. How you live your life in association with others, how you make people feel, how people feel when they are around you. If your life is not controlled by the Spirit, you are not living a spiritual life. Thank you so much for watching today's episode of Morning Breakfast. Do have a lovely day till I come your way again. Bye bye.